So, hello everybody. Hello, the first people coming on board. My name is Vitas Jankauskas. I'm the course lead for this bootcamp that we're starting here. So, Web3, building social networks of tomorrow, during which we're going to work sort of creatively and critically, I guess, to kind of think about, well, what Web3 brings as sort of this new consolidating paradigm towards sort of the way we think about well, I guess how platforms and how social networks operate. But just in general, I think that Web3 is kind of this interesting time to sort of without necessarily taking for granted all of the technological advances, to also kind of use this moment to think about what could be done differently and what could be, I guess, done better for the next generation of social networks. And I'm very happy to have today Cyril Zimmermann, who is the president of La Plateforme. And I'm also very happy to have Braxton Woodham, who is the president of Unfinished Labs, part of McCourt Institute. It's a pleasure to have you here. And then obviously, finally, Darius Kazemi, who I'm going to introduce in a bit. So just a couple of things. So hello to all the candidates. First of all, so hello to all the participants of the actual bootcamp. I saw that some of the people are saying already hello. I can't wait to meet you on Monday in person. And also hello to everybody joining internationally. And so without further ado, I'm gonna pass on the word to Cyril to just say hello on behalf of the platform.
Thank you, Vitas. Welcome to everyone. And obviously, as the president of La Plateforme, I am excited about the partnership that we have created with Braxton and Marquardt Institute, and about this first conference, and to inaugurate the bootcamp about Web3 and the future of social network. La Plateforme is in Marseille. It's not a neutral fact. That's a fact that we're proud about. La Plateforme is an IT school, very inclusive. But being inclusive means also that we're ready for innovation. And that's why we are happy to inaugurate this bootcamp for the next 20 weeks or so. And happy to welcome Darius today for this inaugural talk. So thank you, Vitas, for the organization, and thank you, Darius, for being here. I leave the word to Braxton.
Hey there, everyone. Braxton Woodham. As they mentioned, I'm involved with the technology behind the projects you'll be working on that we call Project Liberty. And just to give you a quick background of why I'm excited to be here with all of you, is that we've been thinking a lot for years now about how the technology driving our communication at scale has evolved in a way that it's become an existential threat to our society. You can see that with the elections in the U.S., with Brexit, with what's happening in Ukraine. There's a through line here that is now undeniable. And while there's no single solution for this really complex situation, we do believe there are concrete steps that we need to take now to address this. And one of those steps, we believe, is to move our core social networking infrastructure out of the hands of authoritarian regimes. And by that, I mean autocracies like China, as well as autocracies like Facebook, and move that into the public domain. We propose to do this by making the web itself socially aware, and that would become our global social network. And we propose to do that through a new protocol that we call DSNP, or the Decentralized Social Networking Protocol. To do that, we need a diverse global village of people like you, to help actually design, develop, and imagine this new world. And that starts, I think, here today. This is the first program like this we've done. So extremely excited that all of you are going to help us, imagine the possibilities of social networking, Web3, and what this all could ultimately become. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much, Braxton. And yeah, so thank you for all those who are joining just now. So very happy to invite Darius Kazemi, an internet artist, and how he defines himself, to participate in today's inaugural talk, because this is kind of the way that we want to think about social networks, basically mixing profiles, taking creative people, taking people from the developing background, taking people who don't even I don't know, touch technology on a daily basis, and just kind of look into what it means to kind of socially think about social networks, whether that would be today or tomorrow or whenever, really. So I'm very happy. I'm just gonna briefly introduce. So Darius goes under the pseudonym of Tiny Subversions, and he's an internet artist. He co-founded FieldTrain, a creative technology cooperative in Portland, Oregon. And he makes bots and generators and other weird stuff, and has recently, well, he modestly says recently, but I actually have been following his work for a few years, and he's been talking about social networks and then kind of working on theoretical and practical projects to make them more human scale, which is something very important to us and delightful, as he defines it himself. So I'm sure he's going to talk about it more in detail. Without further ado, I'm passing on the word to Darius Kazemi.
Hi, thank you so much for the intro, and thanks for the framing from the team as well. That's super helpful to hear, and super exciting to hear that you're all sharing interest with me. I'm assuming that everyone can see and hear everything okay. Just Vitas, let me know if it's not working for some reason, but. Yeah, hello, my name's Darius. I'm based in Portland, Oregon in the United States. And I am a internet artist and also programmer, a professional programmer by day. I work at a nonprofit called Medan on software that helps people, it helps platforms and news organizations combat misinformation on the internet. And someone's asking about, can you send in questions? I think that's fine. I might answer them at the end. Yeah, there we go. And I just want to talk a little bit about first explaining my career path and sort of how I got to this place of caring about the decentralized web, because I think I come from a little bit of a different spot than a lot of people who are maybe advocates around this. So without further ado, I started my career actually in video games. I worked on multiplayer online games like Lord of the Rings Online, you see here. And so from the very beginning of my career, I was working in kind of virtual worlds, as you might call them. I spent 5 years working on games, and then I got interested in games on the web that run in a web browser. This got me into web technology. So after working on a few different indie games, I decided to kind of pivot my career into just caring about stuff that you can do in the browser that's interactive and that sort of thing. So this is where I got really into open source software. I got really into building art using open source software. And this was a practice that I had that was pretty active from about 2012. I still do it to this day, but it was very active from about 2012 to 2017. I built stuff like this project called Random Shopper, which is a bot that I gave $50 a month, and it would buy random stuff on Amazon and ship it to me. And so I'd get these surprise packages in the mail. And I'd open them up and I'd get something like what you see on the right there, an album by Hungarian electroacoustic composer Ákos Rosman. Sometimes I'd get random books or what have you. Another example of more visual stuff that I've done is this is a Twitter bot called Glitch Logos, and it glitches up famous corporate logos, and it just lives in your social media feed. I've made 60, 70 bots on Twitter that generate art like this. And then after spending about 5 years building art bots that live on Twitter and in social media, around 2017, a lot of things changed on Twitter. I mean, as an American, 2016, we had the US elections, and as was alluded to earlier, people were kind of rethinking what social media is for and the amount of power social media has. There was a lot of blame placed on bots on social media for harming elections and harming democracy. Twitter was, my understanding as an outsider, is Twitter felt pressured by the press and society to crack down on bots a little bit more. And so as a result of that, they changed around their APIs. They changed what you can do with Twitter as a platform. And, you know, some of those changes were probably warranted, but what it also meant was that my art bots didn't work anymore. These art projects that had been living in my social media feed for years at this point suddenly didn't work. And either I would have to spend a lot of hours every week maintaining these or changing them or redesigning them, or just throw my hands up and decide that it's not worth it anymore. So this was where I got interested in decentralized web technology. In particular, I was really interested in self or community owned and maintained platforms. So a way that I could host social media in such a way that I control what's going on there. I'm basically in the role of Twitter here. Now, of course, I can't host millions and millions of people on a computer, on my laptop or anything like that. But that's where decentralized technology comes in and federated technology. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But the impetus for me was I wanted a place to put my art where I could control the context in which it is presented and control the technology behind it. As a result, I ended up working in, I did a fellowship, an open web fellowship with Mozilla and the Ford Foundation. And as a result of this, I traveled around, I talked to people in the decentralized social media space, and I ended up writing a guide called Run Your Own Social, how to run a small social network site for your friends. And this has become a text that a lot of people have used in their projects for building social media software. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, it would be this sort of second bullet point here. It's about social solutions to social problems. I'm going to return to that point again over the course of this talk. But essentially, people tend to come to the web and the internet, and I guess technologists in general come to society thinking that we can provide technology that will solve social problems. And some technology can help solve social problems, but ultimately all social problems, in my opinion, are solved through social means. And I'll get to that in a little bit. Let me talk a little bit about federated social media. So when I talk about this concept, my favorite way to put it is that in the case of Facebook, let's say, Facebook is one company and they own thousands of computers, or probably tens of thousands of computers, or maybe more than that. And when you connect to Facebook, you are connecting to their network of thousands and thousands of computers that they're running. And all these computers coordinate together and they allow 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion people to interact with one another. YouTube works the same way. Basically, any of the big major, TikTok, all that stuff, it works the same way. It's thousands of computers coordinated by one entity, and that entity is a corporation. And that corporation ultimately has the last say in anything that happens on those computers. This is the source of a lot of issues, as was alluded to earlier. In the case of federated social media, which includes software like Mastodon, Diaspora, Bookworm, PeerTube, I'll go over a few of these later. These are pieces of software that are similar to Facebook and YouTube, but instead of thousands of computers controlled by one entity, it's thousands of computers controlled by thousands of entities. And these entities do have absolute power over the computer they control, but it's only one computer. It's only one piece of that network. And so this is why you sometimes hear these things referred to as distributed or decentralized, because instead of one central authority like the Meta Corporation, you have lots and lots of different groups that own and have control over these different areas. You could think of it like in a country, for example, maybe, or as each one of these is their own autonomous nation or that sort of thing. It's tough to come up with good metaphors, but the important thing to know is that it's about who is materially controlling the computers that all this stuff runs on. And so the basic idea here is to keep the thousands of computers and change the ownership of these thousands of computers and distribute that ownership among lots of different people. Where I spend most of my time on social media is a network called Mastodon. This is an example of my home on Mastodon, although I'm showing you public posts from around the Fediverse here, so because I didn't want to violate anybody's privacy. So this is just random public posts from people, and it looks kind of like Twitter. That's what Mastodon's trying to do. It's trying to be like Twitter. And the experience of Mastodon is basically like the experience of Twitter. The difference is, I don't know if you can see it very well here, but when you look at people's handles here, this is matt@cyber.space, right? This is Rysiek@mastodon.technology. And these are people, these are formatted more like email addresses. And these different sites live at different domains. And some of these might not even be using the Mastodon software because there's interoperability between Mastodon and other pieces of software. I run one such piece of software called Hometown, but Mastodon can also talk to Bookworm, it can talk to PeerTube, it can talk to other pieces of software. And so if your friend has an account on some other site, you can still follow them, they can follow you, and you can interact with each other. And so people can sort of choose their home bases, and every home base has its own set of rules and norms about what is acceptable. Now, this means, in addition to places like the one I'm showing you here, where I have talked to everybody and we sort of broadly agree that certain kinds of content are acceptable, certain kinds of content are not. On someone else's server, it might be completely different. They might have rules that I completely disagree with. And that's where we start to, different servers can block other servers. There's a lot of moderation tools built in, and it gets complicated. And the reason why it's complicated is society is complicated. Socializing is complicated. If you've ever done any organization in real life, in groups, if you've run a club, a social club, for example, right? Like there's going to be a geometrically increasing number of relationships between everybody in the club, and you're going to have to manage those relationships. And there's no piece of technology that can solve managing all those relationships. Life is, as they said in the chat here, life is complicated, life is messy, and so things are going to be messy, and technology cannot make life less messy. What technology can try to do is flatten life into something that isn't messy. I'll actually maybe pull up an example here. I wasn't planning on showing this, but forgive me. One example of this. Yeah, here we go. Hopefully you can see. This is from Run Your Own Social. And this is an example here of a website that I built. It's a social media site called Dolphin Town. And the only thing that you can do is post the letter E. If you try to post a letter that is not the letter E, it throws an error and it doesn't work. So people just post E all the time. And I made this site to kind of prove a point, which is that when you own the platform, you can make the rules as arbitrary as you want. But this is also an example of flattening life, flattening social life. And so I don't really have to worry about moderating this server. I don't really have to worry about people posting, being mean to each other or anything. I mean, look, they can be mean. I'm sure there's a way someone can be mean to someone using just the letter E. But by scoping down what people are able to do with their lives, it becomes easier. But this is how technology works, right? Technology flattens life and into a format that the technology can handle. And we can't make a technology that is messy enough to actually handle all the complexities of life. So I just wanted to kind of point that out really quickly using examples here. Here's another example of some software that I can subscribe to if I'm on Mastodon. It's Bookworm, so I have an account on Bookworm, an account on FriendCamp. Bookworm is kind of like Goodreads. It's for leaving reviews of books and recommending books to your friends and that sort of thing. And it's a wonderful little piece of community-run software. PeerTube is an example of it's pretty niche. Not a lot of people use it, but it's a way of setting up your own little video sharing and posting and hosting website. So and I can, if I'm back on this site, I can subscribe to Bookworm and PeerTube accounts, and I can get people's book reviews, and I can get updates to when people post new videos and things like that into my Mastodon feed here. And again, I like to think back to like Twitter used to let you put a link to an Instagram account or an Instagram post, and it would put the Instagram photo right there in the Twitter feed. Then when Instagram got bought by Facebook, Twitter decided that they were now a competitor, and so they removed that feature. And so now when you post an Instagram link, there's no nice big picture there anymore. And so that sort of adversarial competition doesn't have to exist. It can exist, but it doesn't have to exist on the decentralized web. And in particular, you know, because you have individual communities controlling these different nodes, you can have norms about like, oh, well, okay, maybe we don't want to embed Facebook content because we don't trust Facebook anymore, but we do want to embed content from these other sites. And you can make choices and decisions about this as a community. I think about who uses federated social media right now. The numbers aren't that impressive from if you're thinking in terms of Facebook and Twitter and sites like that. By best estimates, these estimates are from Fediverse Observer, which is a website that collects open self-reported statistics about federated social media. There's about 4.5 million user accounts total across all of these different sites. And 3.5 million of those are on Mastodon. So Mastodon is kind of the most popular of all of them. But also, even though it seems centralized because there's a lot of Mastodon users, even within Mastodon, the largest servers out there have about 200,000 people on them. So at the very least, if we have 6 or 7 different servers that make up maybe 50% of the population of the Fediverse, which is certainly better than and less centralized than something like Facebook, where it's 100%. But by my estimates, there are probably only about 130,000 weekly active users on the Fediverse. That's like people who log in and at least look at their Fediverse social media accounts once a week, about 130,000 people. So it's not huge, but also 130,000 people is a lot. I want to talk about another project, which is my project, Hometown. Hometown is a fork of Mastodon. That means it's essentially it's a legal copy of Mastodon because Mastodon is open source software. So I took Mastodon and I modified it and added a few extra features that I thought would be helpful for people. And these features are based on maintaining a small, active community. And it's a little bit more focused on community safety than Mastodon is. And so for every million users of Mastodon, there are 1,000 users of Hometown. So Mastodon is literally 1,000,000 times bigger than Hometown. But something that I noticed is that the active users on Hometown are actually, the numbers are way higher than on Mastodon. It seems like software that is built to help small communities communicate and be safe and organize even outside the software, which is again what Hometown is trying to do, causes people to be more active on the software and in these communities. I really wanted Hometown servers to feel like a group of people you know in real life who hang out at a cafe or who hang out in a club or hang out at a school. And I tried to design the software with real life socializing in mind. So I'm not going to get into the very specific details, but that was something that I tried to do there. Yeah, so this is my important note here, which is, retention rates are better when care is given to the social health and cohesion of the group. I put retention in scare quotes here because retention is kind of a business term. I was once asked in a question and answer, how do you handle retention issues on your social network site? So what happens when you lose users? And my answer to that was I try my best to talk to those users. If someone does leave my site, it's usually not a surprise to me. We've had people leave, and usually that's the result of weeks or months of conversation where they've talked about the different reasons why they're not comfortable there, or why they need something different than what the place can give them. And so, it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm losing a user. I mean, again, on my node of Hometown, which is called Friend Camp, we have 50 active users. It's 50 people. We mostly all know each other. There are some people who don't know each other. Obviously, it's a group of 50. There's always going to be little clusters and stuff. But for the most part, we know each other. We function as a community, and it's nice. It's just a really nice place to be on the internet generally. It's not for everyone. Like I said, we've had people leave and that sort of thing because real life is messy. And as a note, and I unfortunately can't talk about this too much in this talk, but I do want to talk about. I do want to mention it's happening is we are working out a new way to do governance. Up until today, I've been kind of the benevolent dictator of the little social node. And that model worked for 3 years. Friend Camp has been around for 4 years. It'll be 4 years this summer. But we're trying to move towards a more democratic way of organizing things. And I've tried to base it off of real life organizing structures that I've seen, and so in activist groups and things like that. So we're hoping to move to a model where we have a core group of kind of rotating officers who manage it instead of me all the time, and the group takes votes. We are going to use something called Lumio, which is open source software built for groups to collaborate. And we're going to make proposals, take votes, get consensus, that kind of thing. And so, if somebody wants one of the rules about how to use the social network to change, they would make a proposal. That's the idea, at least. And then the proposal gets discussed, voted on, and talked through in this group of 50 people. And something that I'll point out is that this is really only possible because we're a group of 50 people. I would not expect this to be possible with even 500 people. Large groups are unwieldy and messy and difficult to organize. And this is why my vision for distributed social media is lots of little groups of maybe 50 people or so. I mean, that would be ideal. I don't think it's realistically going to get there. I think we're going to have fairly big servers. But of course, even a server of 100,000 people is very different from a server of 1 billion people like you have on Facebook. I'm going to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room here, which is Web3 and blockchain. When people talk about the future of the web right now, and specifically about the future of social media and decentralized social media, this term Web3 comes up over and over again, and it's usually linked in people's minds to a concept called blockchain. I just would like to point out there's not really a great definition of Web3. Like, I couldn't find one. It's pretty much a marketing term. It just means this thing we're working on that is vaguely going to replace the Web 2.0 sites like Facebook and YouTube and all that sort of thing. You do see repeated claims about Web3. So they always claim it's going to be decentralized. There's usually some sort of claim that the platforms will pay or incentivize users to actually be on them. This is sometimes tied into an idea of ownership. So like, if I own shares of a platform and that platform does well, then I make money just like I would make money from owning stock in a corporation, and that corporation does well. But of course, we already have this for Facebook. It's called buying Facebook stock. So I don't see it as all that different from what we can do through the current technology we have at hand. There's talk about users owning their own content, which is great. I am totally in favor of that, but you don't necessarily need blockchain to do that. People who post on FriendCamp or on all these other sites, you can have legal agreements set up where people own the content that they have there. There's a lot of focus on monetization, which I think is interesting. There's work being done on monetization in federated social media as well. So there's some connection there. And then there's this piece that people like to talk about when they're being especially idealistic about it, which I like. I prefer talking to idealists, where they talk about users purchasing or earning tokens that can be used to vote on governance. And so I've been thinking a lot about this piece, especially because we're changing our governance model on FriendCamp, my hometown server right now. And this is tied with something called a DAO, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. You'll probably hear this phrase a lot over the next year. Most of these boil down to, and I've read about a bunch of these. I've interviewed people who run or who are part of DAOs. And usually it just means users purchase a cryptographic token or a number of cryptographic tokens. And then the number of tokens you have tells people how much voting power you have, which again is actually conceptually very similar to shareholding in a corporation. And so I don't know, one popular DAO, the person running it told me, no, it's great because we can look at the coin price and see how healthy our community is, which is strange to me because I also hear corporations talking about looking at their share prices and talking about how healthy their company is based on the share price. But if I am of the opinion that corporations basing their health off of their share price and not like what they can give back to the world is bad for the world. And I just see this pattern being replicated in a lot of these DAOs. So I'm actually very skeptical of Web3 as a basis for decentralized social media, but I think it's going to be part of the landscape for at least a few years. I also want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to go back just for a second here and talk about success as well. So when I bring up federated social media to people who are sort of trying to replace the Facebooks and YouTubes and that sort of thing, especially people who are trying to do Web3 stuff, I they ask me, okay, well, how many people are using your software? And I tell them, I'll say, well, my software, a few hundred people. And they go, well, that's not success. That's not the kind of success we're looking for. And my only response to that can be, okay, but it is the kind of success that I'm looking for, right? Like what I've managed to do is give 50 people a reasonably good place to hang out on the internet. And given them the opportunity, and by the way, just to be clear, it's not just these 50 people talking to each other. These 50 people have access to all 130,000 people on this network here. So it's not like it's not like a private forum. They're out there talking to other people, but we sort of have our own little, it is a bubble, I would say. It's a little bubble where we can set our own rules and talk to each other inside there as well. And my response is basically, look, I built some software that has 600 active weekly users. And, if I started an event here in my city where people came out once a week and there were 600 people, that'd be a huge success as an event. And I don't spend that much time and money on my hometown project. So I want to encourage people who are working in technology to think about doing the equivalent. You don't have to think about building technology that's going to replace Facebook, for example, right? You can build technology that is just useful to your immediate community, and that can be an enormous success, and that can be a really fruitful use of the technology skills that you build up over time. So I just want to encourage people to okay, you can think big, but there's all sorts of resources out there about thinking big. I want to flip that on its head and say, well, what can you do if you keep things small? And designing for specific small use cases and your own local communities is actually really fruitful and interesting, and in a lot of ways easier, right? Like I can't design a social network that meets the needs of 1 billion people. Nobody can, because people are too different from each other. But I can pick out 50 people that I know and design software that is mostly good for all 50 of those people. So again, I harp on about this sort of thing, but I think it's important to not just think about scaling software so that billions of people can use it. And especially if you're starting small to begin with anyway, just make stuff for that small group of people. If you get 1 billion users, then worry about what 1 billion users need. Let's see, I've already kind of talked about this. I guess the main thing that I would say about Web3 or any technology that comes along, and this is what I started the talk with, is that my main clue for whether a social technology is going to be useful or not is if the technology claims to solve the problems by itself. So if they say, oh, all you have to do is use our technology and then your problems around social media will be solved. That is usually a lie. It is really hard to solve these social problems, and I just that's a big red flag for me when anyone makes that kind of claim. And so that's pretty good. I'm pretty much coming up on time here. So that's my sort of broad overview of where we're at in terms of decentralized social media right now. And I would be more than happy to take questions from people. And I just want to again, leave you with these ideas of building software for small communities, right? Think smaller. And beware of anyone who claims to have a magical technological solution to social problems, because social problems are always going to be messy, and we're never going to have a magic solution to that. So thanks. That's what I wanted to tell you today. And I think I'm waiting for Vitas to show. Yeah.
Yes, I'm showing up. Oops. Wait, how do I? Oh, yes. Okay. Let's put ourselves. Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. Please, people, I've seen that there's been some nice engagement. Let's see. So Joshua is asking. network like propaganda, hate speech, and fake news. Facebook
Yeah,
and content.
I'll just read the question out loud and then answer.
Please,
it.
please.
Yes,
please.
Joshua Lang asks, doesn't a fully open and decentralized social network invite misinformation, propaganda, hate speech, and fake news? Facebook, in contrast, hires lawyers in every country so Facebook can abide by hate speech laws. How will an open protocol be better other than distributing the power to the same people, distributing in quotes because I think he doesn't actually mean distributing. Distributing that power to the same people, often governments who easily persuade people with propaganda and fake news, or the majority of users who don't want to build their own micro social networks and just follow, right? Yeah, and those are really interesting things to think about. Like my day job, again, is at a place called Medan, and we work on issues of misinformation and propaganda and hate speech. And so I'm thinking about this a lot. One of my issues is that it is, yes, Facebook does hire lawyers in all these countries to abide by hate speech laws. I still don't know if it's possible for a single entity to regulate the speech of 3 billion people, and that goes for governments. That goes for companies. It's complicated. I think so. I will regularly, and so I'm going to talk about the reality of decentralized social media, right? A lot of these decentralized social media sites, I will go to some of them and I'll say, oh, this is a decentralized social media site that is specifically for anti-Semites, and I don't agree with that at all. So the first thing I do is I block them so they can't interact with my group of 50 people. But the question is, how do we, if the question is, how do we stop this from spreading? I really think that we have to trust individual communities to make these choices. There will be sort of secondary layer type things, right? There are already published list of servers that if you basically, so if I trust your judgment and you are paying attention to all of this disinformation, then I'll just sort of offload that onto you. And that's kind of what we do with Facebook anyway, right? People say, oh, well, I trust Facebook's judgment on what they think is hate speech or disinformation. And so I'm going to trust them to moderate it all out. I think the difference is that hopefully, instead of trusting a giant corporation, you might be able to trust smaller entities that you maybe have a little more accountability with. And then also you always have the option to just roll up your sleeves and do the work yourself or as a community for your community. It's not a perfect, there's not perfect solutions right now. Of course, there aren't going to be perfect solutions, but that's where my head is at right now. There's even, I can go to a city 100 miles from here where the social norms in that city would be considered hate speech and disinformation in the city where I live. So this is a problem that exists in the real world too. And it sucks and it's a hard problem, but I don't necessarily see the internet looking like the real world to be a bad thing. Like that's kind of, that's almost what I see as more of a natural state. Let's see. We have another question. Someone's mentioning that they've been struggling using DAOs, and they linked to metagov.org, which does DAO governance research. That's cool. Let me see. Oh, the chat is not, here we go. Do you think the current focus on tokens and DAOs is polluted by people entering get-rich-quick schemes, and how would you address the subject? I do believe that there's a lot of get-rich-quick kind of gold rush mentality around DAOs as a way to maybe make some money or that sort of thing. In fact, if you look at most DAOs, there's not even any voting or anything like that. It's oftentimes just a Discord, and there's not even a token, which is really funny because Discord is centralized. There might be a token, but and they might do a little bit of voting or something, but there's also a lot of buying and selling of the token for profit. Again, this is just like the stock market, you know, like if I buy shares in a company, technically that's me buying voting rights. I mean, in certain cases, it's me buying voting rights in a company, but you can also speculatively buy and sell those things, and the speculation kind of takes over the actual ownership instead. And most of the volume is about speculating on these things. So I do see it as polluted by people trying to get rich quick right now. But also I don't see that as temporary either. I see that as kind of the permanent state of DAOs. Sarah asks, what Mastodon instances would you recommend for someone curious about the protocol to look at? So, you know, mine is closed to new members. It's closed for a reason, because we're sort of stable at our size right now. But I'll drop a link in the chat in a little bit. If you search for, you can find lists of hometown servers, and I think most of the people who run hometown servers do a pretty good job. Let me actually just pull up that link right now so I can just drop it in there. That's a list of servers that I like, so hopefully that'll be useful to you. You can also check the more broad Fediverse aggregation lists, but those are ones that I mostly think are pretty cool. Another question is, what do you think about the use of blockchain to secure accounts and information shared through social networks? Okay, yeah, so blockchain is a huge technical and social topic that I didn't really have time to get into today. What I would say is that using blockchain is a weird one, because people talk about how it's decentralized, but it's not decentralized. It's actually a big central conceptual thing. What's the best way to put this for people who maybe don't know what blockchain is? I guess what I would say is securing stuff through blockchain is useful, but it's also, there's other solutions besides blockchain that can be used for security purposes. I'm really interested in this concept called OCAP, OCAP, that you can look up, and it's short for Object Capabilities, and it's trying to be a more actually distributed and less there's not based on proof of work or even proof of stake or anything like that. The algorithms are essentially more environmentally friendly, we could say, and I think it provides a lot of the real benefits that the blockchain stuff can, but much better in a social network context, because it's designed for accounts talking to each other and transacting and that sort of thing. So again, I could get into like another hour-long blockchain diversion, but unfortunately I can't. And someone asked about gas fees for using blockchain. I mean, so for those who don't know, gas fees are fees that you have to pay in order to do a transaction on a chain. And those fees exist because doing a transaction on a chain takes time, and people need time and energy. And so people bid for the right to make a transaction. And it's just, there's a huge problem for me there, which is just, it's linked into the financialization of everything. You know, it's like if every time you tried to access google.com, you had to spend a fraction of a cent of your own money, up to maybe a few dollars of your own money, in order to make a Google search, because you are competing with other people for time on the Google servers. And there's a market built in for that. And like, it kind of works, but also it just ends up being prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. And it means that the people who already have capital and money are able to do transactions. And it just ends up as a massive re-centralizing thing. Laurent asks, do you think free speech would be better implemented in true end-to-end encrypted systems where no management is needed at all and people do the job themselves? I'm just going to say I don't know on that one. It's something that I think about, but I try not to be. I try to be honest when I answer, and I can say I don't know on that one.
Darius, I have a question.
Sure.
So, it's easy to go very technical, especially with Web3 and blockchain and everything. But I guess one of the main points that you're kind of trying to cover today is this. Well, looking at social networks socially, right? And this is the way you're kind of approaching the topic. So I would like to sort of ask you, for the people who will now spend these 12 weeks, right, imagining new social networks, because we're also focusing on smaller communities. We're also going to look into very local sort of people and how they use today's social media as opposed to how they could use it. What kind of questions do you think people should be asking themselves when thinking about social networks of tomorrow?
I mean, the questions that I like to ask myself are, especially when I'm looking at like a local community, it's like, what kind of value can I create for this community that may not even be a value that anybody else needs? Like, what are the unique needs of this group of people that I'm hoping to organize? And is there a way that I can address those unique needs for them, in a way that makes my software better for them than anything else out there in the world, because I'm the only person who is trying to create something specifically for these people. So I think I guess I would just say, like, paying attention to really, really local use cases. Again, we try to think all the time, like, oh, what is every single person in the world going to need from this piece of software? And I do want to balance this against accessibility, right? Because like accessibility is very important. It's really important to say things like, what is a user with a specific kind of special need, right? If I don't wear my glasses, I can hardly see anything. So like, are there special needs that I have when it comes to a social network site? Like maybe being able to choose different colors that are easier on my eyes or something, right? The cool thing about designing software for 50 people or 100 people is you can talk to literally every single person who's using your software and figure out what they need. It's a lot of work, but you can do that. And I recommend doing lots of interviews. It's broadly just what's known as user research, right? But user research for something like Facebook means that they have to talk to, 100 or 1,000 people every month and get their input on how Facebook should be. And that's 1,000 people out of 1 billion. But you can talk to all 100 of your 100 people in your community, then you can figure out exactly where everyone's needs lie for kind of maximum accessibility. So that's something else I would put in there too. Is my audio working? I'm told my camera is stuck.
Yeah, your audio is working well.
Okay, well, I'm just about done anyway, so I'll try and turn my camera on and off. Maybe that'll help.
Yes, that's perfect now.
Okay, great.
I welcome Braxton, for example, because you're working on your own stuff. If you'd like to join in, and ask some questions, feel free, but also no pressure. Well, we have another. Let's see what is happening on the chat. Okay, it's getting very social. Now we're getting social there. Yeah, I wish we were living under new circumstances, right? We wish we could have you here so you could see, the local context and the way, what Marseille is all about. Because I think that's what Cyril was saying also at the very beginning, that the context is very important, right? And Marseille is actually a very specific and kind of precious town in the European context, right? And all this city in France as well. I think it's all great. It's interesting. Like, I guess my last question is like, how did you? So you started from video games, right? And then you went into sort of doing bots, and then eventually ended up thinking of on social media. Was there a particular event? Was there something that was kind of happening that put these things into like cohesive timeline, or is it just a sort of interest kind of driven thing?
I would say it's mostly just chance and things, you know, just getting just happenstance. But you know, it really was the as I mentioned, Twitter tightening the abilities for me to do creative things on Twitter that made me think about self-determining local social media versus something that I didn't control. So that's really the big kind of turning point for me there. And just in general, you know, because my day job is writing JavaScript, you know, I would think like, well, okay, how can I use these tools that I already use every day to address some of the issues that I want to see addressed in the world, right? So I'm just trying to use the skills that I have. If I had a different set of skills, I'd probably be doing different things.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's we're right in a very good time, just coming up to an hour. And yeah, so thank you so much, Darius. It was really, well, it was really sort of honest and cool and well, small scale as we like it, right? So thank you everybody for the questions. Can't wait to meet the candidates. Thank you to candidates, I mean to actual students who are going to come on Monday in person. And thank you also to some mentors who joined as well. And yes, well, looking forward to the course and what we can come up with.
Yeah,
right?
Thank you for having me, and good luck to all the students as well. Yeah.
Thanks so much. All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a good weekend, and thanks for joining.